Welcome to the channel. Today, we're exploring some unbelievable story. Stay tuned and let's dive in. I was seated in the back of the pub on a Friday afternoon, enjoying the peace and quiet. It had been my favorite area when I was wandering alone a few years ago. I found it soon after moving here, after leaving Seacliff, my previous home. During that time, I purchased the neighborhood gas station and auto repair business for less than its value. It'd been on the market for 3 years and the owner was anxious to sell. I recognized its potential and made a lowball cash offer, believing it was the ideal place for me to start over. It allowed me to put behind me what I had been forced to leave. The first thing I did was construct a huge retail shop in the front of the land, facing the petrol pumps, to feed the town when the lone grocery store closed for the evening at 8 p.m. I also updated the pumps to pay at the pump, which required relocating the tanks. The pumps could now be seen from the shop, leaving plenty of parking places for customers in the center of our huge lot. From 8 p.m. It became the store's busiest hours from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. The convenience store was now open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, while the garage, located in the rear of the property, opened at 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., 5 days a week. I would come in on weekends to work on special projects. The bar was agitated for a time when the retail section began selling the fundamentals of booze. It was similar to other small-town companies in that you would never become wealthy fast, but it gave a very excellent living and contributed to the community's need for work. With no actual work outside of farming, we were able to save more money each year than most people. Most young folks moved out as quickly as possible. After some internal shop merchandising reorganization, and due to a girl I had to recruit, it quickly became a very profitable firm. It had paid back the money I had put in it as a shareholder's loan. We had to double the personnel since it grew so crowded on Friday and Saturday evenings. We sold a lot of junk food as people left the pub trying to sober up before heading home. On Sundays, we offered a lot of chilled beer at a fair price. I was enjoying a straight double shot of bourbon with a glass of chilled water and a chopped lemon on the side, having just completed repairing a steering column in an old farmer's vehicle. It was a family relic that he was really proud of. It had taken me 7 months to locate the down component, and I still had to make some of the attachments by hand. His family had driven the truck since the 1950s, and he wasn't about to quit. I assumed if he had his way, he'd be buried under it. Around 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. was the greatest time to be in the bar, since most of the regulars would be eating dinner in a few hours. When the band began performing, the venue filled up with music fans. The farmhand planned to bring in the farmer's daughter for fun and after-work amusement. In the 6 years I'd been here, I'd established a strong reputation and made many friends. The majority of the residents had a tendency of keeping an eye out for one another and would alert the individual if anything unusual occurred. I only visited the pub once a week, on Thursdays at the same hour, to have my one and only before returning home. It was my downtime, when I could think freely. I watched them walk in. I wished I hadn't, since they marred the conclusion of an otherwise beautiful day. I would still know them anywhere, at any time, and in any location, but I wished I hadn't. The woman was my ex's twin sister, and the young guy accompanying her was someone I formerly referred to as my kid. It triggered memories that I hoped it hadn't. It was a moment when I realized that you couldn't perceive evil if you were living with it. He had matured since the last time I saw him, and his appearance had altered significantly. He looked more like his biological father. It demonstrated to me that, regardless of the circumstances, the truth will eventually emerge. Today's question was, why were they hunting for me now? They went straight to the bartender and spoke with him for a while. I observed her take out a photograph from her handbag and display it to him. The bartender spoke to them briefly, and I observed them turn and go out the door. I was glad for my long, untidy hair, big beard, and mustache, which contributed to give me a totally new look, particularly now that I had dropped the excess weight I used to have. Nobody saw the SMS message I had sent out. All it said was, "They are back, you'll be home when I can." About a half hour later, the bartender emerged from behind the bar. He moved over and sat down. "What did they want?" I inquired. "They are looking to get a message to you. They say they heard a rumor that you were living here and they came to check it out," Tom told him. "They are saying that a person named Sophia is dying of cancer and hasn't long to live. They are looking for you because she wants to make peace. I requested to view a photo of you, stating that I did not know your name. Who are they and what do they want? I opened a red cigarette pack, took out a cigarette, and ripped out the filter, placing the silky end in my mouth before lighting it. The lady is my ex-wife's twin sister. The young man is my ex-wife's son that she passed off as being mine for years. Based on your years of summing people up, what do you think? I requested an answer. Were they speaking the truth this time? He said, reading their body language. I would have to say that they are trying to be honest in part, but are definitely hiding the truth about something big. I agreed. My ex-wife and her sister had always been masters of deceit, making things seem one way in front of you while stabbing you behind the scenes. He got up and returned behind the bar. My thoughts drifted back to almost 6 years ago, when I left. That day, I informed them all that I wouldn't be returning for 6 years. They had all laughed at me, as if I were an idiot. I suppose, to them, I was. They learnt the hard way that day. It was the last time they had seen or heard directly from me. They did not think I was that serious or harmed. They assumed I was merely irritated because of the trick they had played on me. They had no idea that a few weeks before, I had discovered that our youngest kid was really my brother-in-law's son. That epiphany launched me on a journey of exploration that led me to this point. They were unaware at the time that I had been handed documentation by a family member who claimed to have seen me being stabbed in the back by Sophia and Emily, the wicked twins, as she referred to them. In that old woman's opinion, they were black witches who did their craft with absolute wickedness. Earlier that week, before I departed, we found a newly purchased insurance policy on me for double indemnity for accidental death. If I perished in an accident, the compensation would be $4 million. When I stepped out of our home toward my work vehicle, the elderly woman advised me to flee for my life. They had no idea it was already packed with everything I desired from the 16-year marriage. I went down the driveway to the county road, turned right, and did not look back. I had traveled 2 states by the time I stopped driving. I must confess that I was somewhat to blame, since I had gotten Sophia pregnant when she was 16. I was 18 and had recently finished high school. My family persuaded me to do the right thing, and we were married that summer. The other 2 children arrived in short succession. They were still giggling at what they'd done. They found it amusing. Sophia told our girls, "Your dad will return when he is calmed down, he really needs to develop a sense of humor." A few hours later, my wife saw the sheriff's department truck pull up to the front of the home. She approached the door to meet him as he walked from where he had parked. "Are you Mrs. Catherine?" he inquired. When she responded yes, he added, "Mum, you've just been served." What she had requested in fun became serious when she opened the legal envelope. They all discovered the hard way for the first time how much I knew. I'd heard from the elderly woman that my wife was distraught to find that I had dissolved our marriage without hesitation. My lawyer and I had even documented all of our assets and obligations. The DNA testing revealed everything. The romance had lasted a year. The divorce petition included times, dates, places, and hotel receipts that identified the credit card being charged. The material source even offered photos of the pair in action at these gatherings. Emily was a participant since she babysat both our and their children so they could complete their connection. My lawyer had placed a sealed letter inside the legal mail per my instruction. When she opened it, she discovered a letter notifying her that her sister, Sophia, was suing her husband for unpaid child support, marital interference, and public defamation. That's when their laughing stopped. Nobody thought it was amusing anymore. They no longer saw me as a joke. It was I who was enjoying the final laugh. After all, they used to joke that the only thing I was good at was generating money. Everything I did appeared to turn to gold and create financial flow, so Sophia and the kids were spoiled and had everything they needed. Sophia found out later that afternoon that I had sold our 3 companies, which I had started from scratch, paid off all of our debts, and sold the 2 apartment complexes we owned as well. I sold them for a fair profit. I'd cancelled all of my credit cards and erased my identity from all bank accounts. I handed over half of our house to her and grabbed half of what we were worth in cash. All she had to do was consent to the divorce. In doing so, I reduced our cash flow from around $10,000 per month to nothing. Unfortunately for Sophia's sister, she had to learn the hard way the consequences of exploiting me for their benefit. Because of the harm I had caused them, my lawyer demanded that they give up all they had before they separated. All of their assets were frozen before they were even served. After their divorce, they were both devastated. When everything was over, my lawyer brought Sophia back into his office and paid her for a fourth of what they had lost. "Why is he doing this?" she had inquired. My lawyer said it was never about money for him. For him, it was a question of principle. In case you don't know, that's something you and your sister have proved you do not have. He figures by giving you this money, it gives you a chance to start over and hopes you will learn from your experience. Sophia had refused to sign the divorce papers until she spoke with me in person, so we were still in limbo, legally separated but not divorced. I had no need to speak with someone who had knowingly lied to me for years. She needed to work for the first time in her life. For her, it was a fresh experience to discover that money appeared to go quickly with no return. I had my lawyer transmit any important documents to a FedEx mailbox that I leased, and they would forward everything to my company address once a week. I did it on purpose because I knew they would never end given our shared past. The two sisters enjoyed playing with people's emotions and manipulating everyone in their life. Knowing the two of them, I knew they'd plan their retribution. It wasn't a question of if, but when. Walking away from their family was not an option. It would be really frustrating for them if they couldn't locate me. The longer it took, the greater the consequences would be. Until today, no one had been caught pulling a fast one. I believed I had outsmarted them. I knew their game had not ended. I drank my drink and returned home by the rear entrance, just in case they were monitoring the front. I cut across the vacant lot and went around the block, using the back routes to my vehicle. I was just opening the door and about to jump inside when the guy approached and remarked, "You're a hard man to find, Mr. Jackson." No doubt about it, I turned and stared at him, "But how would you know?" "My name is Andrew Carter," he said. "Your eldest daughter, Olivia, is my wife," he said. "That can be a blessing or a curse for you," I told you. "If she behaves like her mother," I said. "So why are you here and what do you want?" "I came looking for you," he said. "Some things need to be settled from the past." "They would be if your mother-in-law," I said, "would just sign the divorce agreement." "What divorce agreement?" Andrew said, surprised. I urged him to get into his vehicle and follow me. A few minutes later, beyond the town's main road, I turned right and drove for nearly a mile before entering a lengthy driveway. I stopped by the farmhouse and escorted him to my home office. I took out my divorce file, switched on the printer, and instructed him to make copies of everything he wanted. Andrew didn't need to know that this wasn't my home, but I had constructed it for the elderly lady in the hopes that she would eventually announce she was ready to leave Riverton. Andrew was a tall, handsome young guy, maybe about 25 years old, with professionally groomed hair and a natural air of confidence. He came across to me as an intelligent guy. The issue for me was he who he claimed to be, and was he a member of Sophia and Emily's team? He utilized my Wi-Fi password and transferred everything from my home computer to his laptop. All critical records were maintained here, with a master copy stored in a bank box. One of the items that piqued his curiosity was a copy of the Sheriff's Department report that Sophia was required to sign the day she was served. He just received a printout of Sophia's lawyer's letter to mine. That lawyer's letter to my caused the greatest harm to what he had been informed. It set everything out in plain and white. Sophia and her lawyer had agreed on an asset settlement, but she would not sign off on the divorce until I met with her personally. The letter from her lawyer confirmed receipt of all outstanding funds by them. While he was performing all that, I was able to see his facial expressions. It proved he had no idea what he was studying. My materials, as they were written out, contradicted what he had assumed. "Do you think Olivia knows?" he inquired. "That's a question you'll have to answer for yourself," I told you. "One question for you, though, is Sophia actually dying of cancer or not?" I responded. "Who the hell told you that?" Andrew inquired. "Tammy was in town today with Seth, looking for me," I told him. "That's what they told a bartender that I know. She is fine and is living common law with the man who was her lawyer back then. She is currently carrying his second child," Andrew told me. She was the one who asked me to find you so she could start the divorce, he told me. She claims it's so she can get remarried. He took out his mobile phone and contacted his wife. I could hear her in the background. He then switched on the speaker, allowing me to hear both sides of the discussion. Olivia, did you know that your mother was lying about the divorce not having been started? Andrew requested an explanation. What are you talking about? Olivia said. You know, our dad skipped town because he was going broke, she said. Just after he left that day, us kids went out too, so we were not home when our mother found out. Mom told us later that it appeared that our deadbeat dad had walked out on all of us. Mom and Aunt Emily told us later that he had cleaned out what was left before he left town. If it hadn't been for our stepdad, we wouldn't have made it. I'm sending you a legal file, Andrew said. Get my sister to watch our baby, he told me, then get back to me as soon as possible after you've read it. As they continued to converse for a few minutes, I stood up and grabbed 2 bottles of beer out to open. I put one in front of him. Why didn't you tell my daughter you had found me? I requested an explanation. Olivia and I have been married for just about 3 years. She gave birth to our son 3 months ago. Rest assured, for now, I'm not going to tell anyone I found you, Andrew told me. As far as anyone in the family knows, I'm working long hours investigating a case. With that, he unlocked his wallet and showed me his badge. It revealed that he was a Riverton Police Department officer. I opened my laptop and navigated to the website for my hometown. When I clicked the link, I was sent to the police department's webpage. It demonstrated that he was giving me the truth. It was that fender bender that got reported a few months ago that gave me the lead to find you, Andrew told me. Olivia put in a missing persons report on you, which got forwarded to a watch for list. The insurance company informed me about the settlement in your favor. So, why didn't you tell Olivia that you found me? I questioned again. In reviewing your detailed file, it became clear that something else might be going on, Andrew told me. The first question I had to ask was, what happened to the $250,000 cash Sophia was supposed to have received on top of the deed to the house? The second is, why have all of them been lying about what really happened? Sounds like someone has been fed a bunch of lies, just like I was. I repeated myself as his cell phone rang. I heard the familiar sound of the message notification. I put the speaker feature on and listened in. Hi, dear, Andrew's wife remarked. Where did you get all of this? Is it real? If it is, we've all been lied to for years. Seth, like me, was unaware of his actual parentage. My sister, Charlotte, will be startled to see this. Mom rode hard for constantly sticking up for our father, so much so that they no longer spoke. This tells a different tale than the Fossards we have been given. Mom and Aunt Emily seem to have left our father with no alternative. For years, the two of them had been secretly messing with his life. What gets me is the fact that the divorce isn't finalized because my mother won't sign off on it, she told me. This makes me wonder what is really going on. It is real. I got the information directly from your father's lawyer, Andrew's wife added. Unfortunately, I had to travel out of state to find it. It seems that a spouse maintained duplicate copies of all of his records on his personal computer. Henry said, I'm delighted he did. The records reveal that your mother was served with the divorce petition on the same day he fled. I scribbled on a piece of paper, tell Olivia to speak to her great-aunt Margaret if she's still living. Henry nodded his head. It's now more important that we find my father, Olivia stated. If only to get the divorce done for him. My dad deserves to be free of my mother and her scheming ways. What happened to the money she received? If she owned the house, why did she have to sell it? The more I review the facts before me, the more I am asking, what the hell is going on, and why was she planning to sue him for desertion once she found him? Olivia said. I got an idea, Henry remarked. Ask my sister to babysit our kid for a little longer. You go chat to Aunt Margaret and tell her what we've learnt. Perhaps it will make her open up. Henry went on, for now, this has to stay with us because it's beginning to look like there may be a strong case of fraud going on. The question that has to be asked is why your mother has been slandering your father for years. This is something I will have to talk to the district attorney about. $250,000 in cash seemed to have disappeared once it was out of your father's lawyer's hands. One final thought, Henry went on, don't even tell your sister for now. If the DA wants to investigate, it's better that no one knows anything. I got up from the table to grab us some refills so he could have some solitude till they concluded their conversation. How come you want Olivia to speak to Aunt Margaret? Henry was thinking about it. Aunt Margaret was the one who gathered all the information on Sophia and George's affair, I informed you. She may have never been married in her life, but she watched over the extended family like a mother hen. As she raised her only daughter, being a single mother changed her view on a lot of things. She believed that Emily and Sophia had conspired and set up the whole thing. Both George and I were being used, but what their ultimate goal was is anyone's guess. If that's true, the question is why, Henry said. Aunt Margaret's granddaughter, Isabella, has wanted her to move in with her for years. She keeps saying not until the truth comes out. We see Isabella when she comes to town with her 2 sons to visit, I informed them. Well, Isabella leads a very private life. Just like I have had to dealing with the Wither sisters, I said. Seems to come with a high price to everyone around them. Sophia and Emily have been using people for most of their adult lives. It wasn't until Aunt Margaret gave me the material that I started to figure that out. Do you have anything to ask me about your children and what's going on with their lives before I go? Inquired Henry. No, not until it's proven to my satisfaction that you are who you say you are, you replied. With the history of the family, this could just be another part of their game, and you're doing just what they told you to do. You might want to look into my lawyer's sudden death, because if she is planning to sue me, what makes her think she can win? Henry's face turned white as he realized what kind of people he had married into. For the first time in his life, we decided to trust each other enough to exchange cell phone numbers. I stood up, walked him to the door, and shook his hand as we said goodbye. Once he was gone, I cleaned up the place and locked it down. I got in the car and drove the long way home, to where Isabella was waiting, just to make sure I want to go over it all again. Did Sophia and Emily have a long-term revenge plan because they needed to get the better of me? Knowing those two, I knew I had to brace myself for what was about to happen, because if they ran out of money, they would do anything to get it. As soon as I walked through the door, 2 little munchkins grabbed my legs. I bent down and picked up my 2 young children, who were the apples of my eyes just as much as their mother, and I felt blessed to have all 3 of them in my life. Isabella called out, "Dinner is almost ready, so go wash up." I gladly did. I had promised Margaret, Isabella's grandmother, that I would keep in touch, and I did, calling her every other Sunday. I told her about what had happened since I had closed the shop, and I never imagined how my life would change after I left Riverton for good. It had been 1.25 years to the day when she called, needing my assistance. Her only granddaughter needed to get Isabella had quit her job, cleaned out her bank accounts, and packed her belongings on the night I was coming to get her. It had taken me a week to find her a 2-bedroom apartment and partially furnish it, which is nearly impossible to find in a small town. Her husband was going to be served as soon as he returned home from his most recent on-base military assignment, which was a 2-week tour. When I arrived at her house around 9 p.m. with the budget rental truck I had just rented for the one-way trip, I had flown in quietly without anyone knowing. With a couple of her neighbors and a few of her friends, we moved what she wanted into the back of the rental truck, and I was in and out of her town in less than 4 hours. When I was asked where I was from, I refused to answer, saying it was best that no one knew for the time being. Isabella and I started to get to know one another as we drove back. It was the middle of the night when her grandmother called her, and I grinned as she responded, "Yes, Grandma picked me up." You could have warned me that he was a wild-looking bushman who might look half-decent if he cleaned himself up. The following day, Margaret contacted her granddaughter's lawyer to have all her legal documents and communication mailed to my FedEx box. Isabella had warned us both that her soon-to-be ex-husband would be a lot of trouble, so I took a proactive stance for her protection. In time, we would both learn that my assessment of her situation was correct. Isabella, once settled, took over running my convenience store. Within weeks, she proved to me that it needed a proper store manager. It turned out to be the best decision I had ever made, as it came naturally to her. The changes she made, with my approval, made the operation even more successful. Her personality alone brought in a lot of new business. She worked with each of the staff, assigning responsibilities and codes of conduct. Margaret had to get a restraining order against Isabella's ex-husband because of the ongoing verbal threats he kept making against her. What he did to Isabella because of her leaving got him a dishonorable discharge, which resulted in him moving back to my old hometown, where he believed his former wife would be. Being new in a small town makes you the center of attention, so Isabella kept wearing her diamond ring. Isabella, who had long black hair that hung straight down and was kept pinned back off her face, was a keeper for me. Within weeks, she was doing all of the banking and getting the books caught up, and everyone accepted her because I had brought her in. She was beautiful in every way, but it was her personality and honesty that I liked, and she didn't take long to size people up. In a matter of weeks, she began bringing me a box lunch on Saturdays because I worked alone that day, and because I'm one of those people who forgets to eat when I'm doing something. I'd lost a lot of weight. That was all it took to start the rumors, and we were soon referred to as the mass future mail-order bride. Margaret kept us up to date on what was going on back home, and it was interesting to learn that Isabella's ex-husband was in a friends with benefits relationship with Emily. The day she got divorced was the day we took our relationship to the next level. We had spent the night celebrating with a group of friends at the only watering hole in town, and we shared our first kiss while dancing a slow dance under dimmed lights. We moved in together 6 months later, and while the kids were bathing and preparing for bedtime, I shaved my beard and mustache off with the small bathroom wastebasket in the sink, leaving only stubble. My children were mesmerized, watching me. I took the bowl and brush she had bought me one New Year and lathered up my face, then I did the same to them, much to their delight. Isabella came in, seeing why the kids were giggling. Just looks like Daddy's going to look like you with a nice clean face, she joked. Do you think I should cut his hair too? Both of the brats said yes. I merely chuckled and replied, I can get the barber to do it on Monday. No, I'm going to do most of it myself, Isabella responded before I could alter my mind. So, after getting them dried and dressed for bed, they were sitting at the kitchen table watching their mom cut my hair. By the time she was done, I looked like a human again, with more hair on the floor than on the top of my head. I hardly recognized myself when I looked in the mirror, and I told Isabella she had done an excellent job. She sent me to the shower to get all the fine hair off while she cleaned up the mess. While I was doing that, her grandmother called, and my daughter Olivia had just left. Isabella had gotten the impression that when it came to her grandmother's sister's family, Margaret was planning to go to war, and her grandmother believed it was time to take those two down. Olivia had left her great-aunt's place with the knowledge that each of my 3 children was supposed to have received an annuity of $600 per month in lieu of child support, which had been purchased by for the next week. I had to endure "Who are you and what did you do to Thomas?" jokes from everyone who knew us. Isabella was asked if she had to blackmail me to get me to join the normal in society. Isabella responded with her usual humor, saying, I promised to force him to have a bath at least 3 times a week. Most people got the joke, but some didn't. It was interesting to learn how things were going in Riverton when you believe your past doesn't stink. The Bird of Riverton told me I was going to be sued for abandonment, desertion, and back child support in civil court. Isabella and I both found this to be a hoot. They believed that if they got the judgment, a collection service could be hired to find me. When the mailman delivered the news, he thought it was a big joke. His boss and the district attorney even hired her. According to Henry, Sophia and Emily stole more than $48,000 from each of our children. They were investigating my former lawyer's sudden death with fresh eyes, and Isabella's ex-husband was now a person of interest as a result. The death by accident was now an open criminal case, and if what they were discovering was true, Sophia and Emily could face 7 to 10 years in state prison. I had to look in the mirror to see if I had the word sucker branded on my face. For a couple of weeks, we had peace and quiet. Then the old lady called. Margaret called us on Sunday night with the news that the paperwork was going to be filed on Monday. She emailed me everything she had collected over the last 6 years, including a truckload of notarized statements, recorded personal conversations, and the names of 3 or 4 lawyers. The $2 million accidental insurance policy on me stood out like a sore thumb, explaining where some of the money had gone. Isabella discovered it had been purchased 9 months before I had left, and we spent half the night forwarding all of the information to the district attorney. Isabella and I both believed this was all being done to entice me back so I could be set up to be taken out. The following morning, Isabella phoned all of the attorneys Margaret mentioned and chose one. Everything we had was provided to them via email, along with a large retainer money. As soon as the Sophia team filed the suit, I would follow up with mine and serve them before they could get it to me. Isabella called me on Friday morning. Margaret was on her way out, bringing Quest with her. They had left Riverton on Friday night, stayed at a hotel overnight, and would be arriving sometime that night. They had left in the darkness of night in case they were being watched, and she told me that things at that end were beginning to come to a head. Isabella and I decided that I'd better close the shop on Saturday and make this a true long weekend for family. My wife, Isabella, asked, "Who is all with Margaret?" When we saw the Chevrolet Tahoe and an Escape pull into the driveway at almost 7 p.m. We could see 4 adults in the 2 vehicles as they approached. Isabella saw my worried expression and took my hand in hers. My truck was parked inside the garage, so no one would assume I was there. "That's Henry, his wife, my eldest Olivia, who is holding their baby, and Charlotte, my second oldest," I told him. "Are you ready for this?" Isabella inquired. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied as I picked up our oldest. Isabella, after lifting our youngest into her arms, opened the front door. We stepped out to greet our guests, united as a family, and I was the last thing my daughters expected to see. Charlotte instantly broke into tears. I handed my son to his great-grandmother and took Charlotte into my arms, holding her tight. Olivia, after handing their son to her husband, came to me as well. My daughters had both matured into beautiful ladies, and seeing them standing side by side was a moment I'd never forget. "It's good to see you again, Henry," I responded, shaking his hand when the introductions were over. Isabella served us all a huge dinner, which was a good thing because she had prepared extra prime beef shoulder roast, mashed potatoes, gravy, fresh homemade buns, Yorkshire pudding, and green beans. For dessert, hot apple pie, fresh out of the oven, put the meal over the top. After our kids had settled down, we started talking about everything. "First of all, Thomas, is it okay that I call you Dad?" Henry said, "Yes." I nodded yes. "Then, Dad, the district attorney now believes that Isabella's ex's car was the vehicle that was interfering with your lawyer's car when the accident occurred. We found the current owner and are in the process of having a paint comparison done by the state. If we can make the connection, he will be charged with manslaughter," Henry told me. The fire that destroyed his office happened that same night. It has always been viewed as arson by the fire inspectors. He can be seen in a video in the background, watching the building burn. Since Sophia and her lawyer had the divorce record sealed, they believe that there are no records to verify what has actually transpired to date. Henry went on. They filed the suit against you this week. Isabella was looking at me when she began to cry. "I always thought you were overprotective in moving me here. Now I see that you were not. I thought the questions you asked my grandmother seemed over the top. I realized now you needed to know what kind of man we were dealing with before deciding on a plan of action. Sophia and Emily were served with your suit on Friday," she said. "They had to realize with that action that I was in contact with you. We were afraid that they would be coming after me, so thus the rush trip here." "Grandma, we have your house ready for you to move into," explained Isabella. "It's been furnished, so all you need is your clothing. Got most of it with me in my car," she said. "Olivia has agreed to have the rest of it shipped to me, along with all my personal things that I want to keep, like the antiques. I've given her power of attorney to sell the house and furniture." Margaret went on. "It was time for me to get out of Riverton really quick. I will drive back with Henry and Olivia in the budget truck rental to bring it all out," I told them. "It's time we found out if our thinking is right." Henry said, "What are you thinking?" "That the suit they filed against me is a ruse to draw me out," I acknowledged. "With the $2 million accidental death policy they have on me, it's plain to see that the death of my former lawyer was a test to see if it could work with me." Olivia, Charlotte, and Margaret's faces became white, as if they were seeing the light for the first time. No one had seen the whole plan, and they couldn't figure out why. Hearing my thoughts brought everything together. "Oh my God, they were planning your death, Dad," Olivia said. "Before you left town, you knew it." "That is why you left the way you did," I said with a broad grin. "At the time, I had a good idea, but not even my lawyer believed it. It looks like he learned the hard way that I was right. Henry left the room to make a few important phone calls, which allowed my daughter's wife and I to learn a little bit about each other's lives. Isabella dug out pictures of how I looked when I first met her, and both had to admit that they wouldn't have recognized me. When Henry returned, everyone fell silent. Sophia is going to be taken into custody the day after the holiday, towards the end of the day. We can hold her for 48 hours before laying charges. She is going to be charged with 3 counts of grand theft for stealing the annuity from her children, Henry told me. We'll slow the process down, so it will take a few days for her to get a bail hearing. Dad, if you can fly in on Tuesday and rent the budget truck rental to drive into town, stop at a few of your old haunts to get yourself noticed. If anyone asks what you're doing, let them know you're here to pack up Margaret's stuff, Henry explained. That way, Sophia will have to be communicated with via the city channel. The DA, when I told him your thinking on the whole situation, said you made perfect sense. Until your thoughts came out, we couldn't put it all together. When you arrive at Margaret's house, we will have police protection for you until it's all played out, he said. You're saying that the father of my children is the bait you need to draw my cousins out? Said Isabella. What guarantees are you willing to give me that you won't be calling me to inform me I am a widow before we're legally married? Isabella was wondering. I glanced at Isabella, who saw my expression and said, "Damn, you're going to do it without a second thought, no matter what." I grinned, knowing she knew me better than I did myself. Margaret responded, "Thomas has always been that way. That's why I called him to save you from the unknown when you finally decided you had enough of your exes." Margaret said, "Thomas will never ask anyone to do something he wouldn't do himself. He wants all of us to be free of the witches for good. If this is what it takes, then to him it's worth it." "Grandma, I'm only afraid that Thomas is going back into the devil's den to face the unknown," Isabella smiled. Margaret reacted, "If Thomas was a boxer, he would be a world title holder. There's no one alive who thinks faster when he's on his feet. That's his advantage against the witches. Everything he will do will be throwing them off their game. Isabella, you need to keep in mind that Sophia and Emily have no clue that Thomas knows anything. Ladies, relax. I'm going to be in Henry's hands, I told them. If anything happens to me, remember he has to answer to Olivia, who is my daughter." Henry knew better than to say anything, so he only shook his head, knowing how hazardous it would be for me if I returned to Riverton later. We got to talk as the 4 women got into a deep discussion among themselves about what was going on. The DA figures that Isabella's ex will make his move shortly after he hears you're in town. He will be enraged to learn that it was you who came and got Isabella out of the terrible marriage she was in, Henry said. That info will come from Sophia, who will be told by a planted informant who will be placed in the city jail early Friday morning. The question is, if he's captured in the act, will he give it all up to save his own skin? I was curious. We looked into his past with the military, Henry told me. Whenever he got caught, he admitted to it and took responsibility. He's a follower, not a leader. So, I expect that he will fold quite easily. The only reason he has a relationship with Sophia and Emily is that he is easy to manipulate. The sign read, "Welcome to Riverton, a sanctuary city, population 34,018. All that did for me was confirm that the city council had declared the laws of the United States of America don't apply here. Welcome to our version of the Wild West. Justice here depends on what we tell the boys in blue to do. We charge law-abiding citizens, but we look the other way for illegals. We are not prejudiced, after all, this is the progressive way. I figured if I wanted to be seen, my first stop should be an old favorite haunt of mine, if it still existed. Thankfully, Bob's and Betty's Diner Delight was still there, except that it had been freshly painted. I pulled into the parking lot and got out of the budget truck rental truck, heading to the main entrance. It was 11:15 a.m., just ahead of the weekday lunch crowd that would be coming in. I was banking on the fact that since I had been a bison after taking a seat and obtaining a menu, I saw a few faces gazing at me, as well as a few mobile phones in use. The waitress came over with my coffee and cream and asked if I was ready to order. "Is the Tuesday special of meatloaf, baked beans and garlic mashed potatoes available?" I wanted to know. "How do you know about that?" the server inquired. "It's reserved for regulars and not advertised," I said. "Tell Jack, Thomas wants brown gravy and a few fried onions on the meatloaf." The waitress looked at me like I was insane, so I jumped up and said, "Never mind. I'll tell him myself." I stepped through the swinging doors into the kitchen, the server following after me. "I'll have the lunch order," I said as I approached Jack, who turned and stared at me. "You stupid," Jack replied with a smile. "You're a few weeks early. Welcome back, old friend. Susan, please bring Thomas coffee back in here. That way we can get caught up while he eats," Jack said from the end of the prep table. Jack was the original owner's son and had never changed the name. We had been friends for the most of our lives. We spoke till rush hour was ended, and he had ordered one of the staff to ask his wife to join us, giving us time to catch up on important matters. "Thomas, you need to know that after you left town, the wife ended her friendship with Sophia and Emily for good. She didn't like what they did or what they said concerning you and the children," Jack told him. "Jack, there's going to be a few things happening. An arrest was supposed to have taken place last night. If a few people's thinking is right, it's going to set off a few events, like starting a row of dominoes, I told you. Isabella's ex-husband Henry is working with me. That's why I'm back early," Jack said with a serious face. "Has one hell of a cop and as straight as they come. He put 2 of our former city councillors in jail last year for corruption. You'll have to tell me what's going on later, too many big ears around here." We watched Lily drive into the lot, and I thought to myself, damn, she looks nice. I sat down and waited for her to walk in, knowing that she would see me from the back and not think anything was wrong. Jack yelled out, "What's up, Susan?" just as Lily entered. Lily froze for a second when she saw me, and then lost it. Her big, old, cruel brother had returned home, and I pulled her into my arms and hugged her close as if it was only yesterday. It took her a few minutes to settle down, and Jack indicated to the kitchen staff to allow us some alone time. "Do Mom and Dad know you're back?" Lily inquired. "No, and it's best that we keep it quiet for a few days," I told her. "Are you here in part because Sophia got taken into custody last night?" inquired my younger sister. "Yes, and it's going to get worse before it gets better," you said. "Once I get to where I'll be staying, I will be under police protection. All I can say is that the police are looking at my former lawyer's death with new eyes. They now have reason to believe it's tied into the arson of his office." With what had been going on in Riverton, it was generally known that the DA, who had been appointed 3 years earlier, was attempting to clean up a lot of problems that had never been settled. "You're the bait to draw something or someone out," Jack stated gently. "If the thinking is right, an arson, a murder, and a few other crimes will be resolved within the next few days," I told them. "All we've done is set up the situation where I would be forced to come back to town," I said. "The arrest of Sophia and my sudden return will turn a very carefully planned conspiracy upside down. What's behind it all?" I was curious. Jack's eyes widened as he said, $82 million double indemnity accidental death insurance policy. I nodded, taken out on me. Lily and I strolled out of the restaurant together to my rental vehicle, where we were standing and conversing when we spotted Emily drive in. My sister said, "Where will you be staying?" "The old lady's place," I said. "I'm going to be moving her stuff to her new home. She wanted to be out of Riverton, so to speak, with all that's about to come down." "Margaret has left town?" Lily inquired. "She wants to be near her granddaughter and our 2 sons," I answered with an emoji. "Isabella and I have been together for over 5 years. We have 2 boys who just turned 3 and 4. Lily was in complete shock. "You and Isabella have?" "Margaret and I have been in touch all along," I told her. "When Isabella needed help getting out of her bad marriage, her grandmother called me. I went in and relocated her to where I lived. We believe her ex is the one who caused my lawyer's death and the arson on his office." "Do Sophia and Emily know you know what's going on?" Lily floated the question. "No, but they'll figure out what's going on once they start making their moves," I said, just as Emily began approaching toward us. "Thomas," she was saying, "I need you to drop part of your suit against us. The DA is laying charges against Sophia within 48 hours, I informed the crowd. "Sorry, my lawyer says we can't, because of Sophia's new divorce petition, claiming desertion, abandonment, and back child support," I said. "Until the divorce court rules on her claims, everything has to remain as is." "You can't mean that." How are we going to be able to get her bail without any assets available? Emily was puzzled. You've got a court order freezing everything, I told you. Maybe your father might be willing to help by putting his house up as security. After all, you're both his daughters. Emily started to walk away, dissatisfied. Sophia and Emily's father has had nothing to do with either one of them, Lily said me. Not since he found out about Seth's true parentage. He says they turned out to be just as evil as their mother. After that, I got into the budget truck rental and drove to Margaret's house, stopping at a few places to pick up packing supplies. 3 hours later, I was backing the budget truck rental into Margaret's driveway, using the large mirror to back it up as tight to the garage door as I could. After climbing out, I locked it up before entering the house, and I walked around it to make sure it hadn't been disturbed. Margaret had to. With that information, I unlocked the front door and entered. Mr. Jackson, the cop replied, giving me his mobile phone. Henry Carter wants to talk to you. Hi, Henry, I addressed him. Looks like those who need to know now know. We got Sophia and Emily on tape talking about having to move their plans up. Isabella's ex, Daniel, came up a lot in their conversation. Sophia told Emily to let him know that you know where Isabella is, and that alone should motivate him to do what we need him to do. It looks like I think Sophia told him where you were staying, Henry went on. Our informant, who got arrested today, had told her that you had come back to move Margaret. When Daniel asked, Sophia said to where her granddaughter Isabella is. A few minutes later, I could be seen opening the garage bay doors, walking into the back of the vehicle, and unloading everything I needed to start packing up the home. At 6:30 p.m., a pizza order from Big Slices came, and I answered the door when the delivery man knocked. The driver said, "Are you moving?" I said, "No, I've just come back to get the stuff to help a friend." Daniel made his move around 11 p.m. that night, smashing the lock on the front door with a car tire iron and slipping inside. Seeing the only light on in the kitchen, he headed there after pulling a 9mm gun from beneath the back of his shirt. He found me sitting there, drinking a cup of coffee. "Hello, Thomas," Daniel responded, his voice icy. "Sophia and Emily offer their welcomes. I'm come to find out where Isabella is so I may pay her a visit." "Sorry, that is something I will never tell the killer of my lawyer," I answered, gazing him down. "Or the guy who burned down his office." I added, "Before you murder me, as we both know you will, how much have they given you from the insurance settlement?" "Why do you believe I did that?" he inquired, taking the bait. "Because you come across as the type of person they could convince through manipulation," I remarked. "I'm sure they promised you a lot, but how much of my $4 million accidental death policy did they tell you about?" $4 million. They told me it was only $750,000, he continued, his expression confused. "Did you know Seth is the son of Emily's first husband?" I laughed. Daniel's face became white. "You see, both George and I were manipulated and used by both of the twins for years," I stated with a quiet, steady voice. "My lawyer, while working on my divorce, sued George and Emily for everything they had." Daniel's complexion became even more sallow. "That's why I knew Sophia suing me for desertion and back child support was a scam," I reported. "The divorce was settled and only needed her signature for it to be done. She needed to manipulate me to come back. That's when I put it all together. You're just the latest sucker to be played by them. So ask yourself," I said, "what are their plans for you? My divorce just interrupted their intentions for my death. You and the removal of my lawyer reinstated their original plan for me. You have the capacity to store them for years. What do your instincts tell you, knowing them as we do?" Daniel's hands started to quiver as the truth sunk in. It's hard looking at a fool coming to the realization that as soon as what he was needed for had be taken out, Daniel muttered, his voice shaking. "Either way, I'm screwed. Manslaughter may get you 5 to 10, but murder is life," I continued. "With me gone, they can claim you were enraged with me because of Isabella and had no idea what you were going to do. They put you up as the fall man. Most accidental death plans do not cover murder. What would you do if you were in my position?" Daniel inquired, his tone barely above a whisper. "Do the time, give over the proof, and hope your cooperation is taken into account. That way, you will be getting revenge on those who were most likely planning to take you out with an overdose of drugs," I added. After all, they must know it was your drug use that got you a dishonorable discharge. Daniel set the revolver down on the table and muttered, "Call the cops," dejected. I nodded and went toward the door. "Daniel, turn around," I whispered as the door opened and footsteps filled the room. "They are standing behind you." The late-night phone call to Henry's cell phone had woken them both up, and Olivia had put the kettle on to make them both a hot chocolate while he was talking on the phone. Henry had told her that her father was at Margaret's house, and when he got off the phone, he smiled. "Your father startled us all tonight," Henry told his wife. He claimed Daniel broke in to murder him and sought information on his ex-wife. He talked Daniel out of it and essentially convinced him to admit everything. The undercover cops captured the whole incident on tape. Olivia was taken aback and exclaimed, "How did my dad do that?" He told Daniel some basic facts that he had no knowledge about, like the truth of Seth's parentage, Henry told me. "I think your father convincing Daniel that the insurance policy wouldn't pay out for death by murder was the deciding factor. Even I don't know if that's true or not, but it created the doubt needed for Daniel to accept the consequences of a lesser crime instead of life without parole." Aunt Margaret said my father thought quickly on his feet, "But I never expected this," Olivia replied, shaking her head. "What does it imply for my mom and sister?" she inquired. "What will happen to them? If Daniel agrees to testify in court against them, they will both be charged with arson, manslaughter, and the attempted murder of your father at least," Henry said with a firm tone. Olivia picked up her phone and dialed Isabella to let her know, and the two of them made plans. Margaret would look after the kids for a few days while Isabella went to the airport to catch a plane, and Olivia would pick her up at the airport when she received the texted arrival time. When she got off the phone, she called her sister and explained everything. By then, Henry had dressed and was on his way to the station to get a signed statement from Daniel before the night was over. After her husband had left, Olivia realized she was too excited to sleep. I woke up after 8 a.m. and the first thing I did was call Jack. I needed the front door fixed and he said he knew someone, and within half an hour, the person arrived. The front door was replaced and a new trim with a new lock was installed. The gentle eye understood at that point how much I had put her through in the previous several days. "Daniel was brought into jail last night," I replied, and submitted himself to the police officers who were here to guard me. I was never really in danger. "If that was so, why didn't you call me?" Isabella inquired. Why did I have to learn it from Olivia? "It was almost 2 a.m. before the police cleared out last night," I replied. "I decided I would call you today." I drew my wife into my arms and hugged her tightly before adding, "I promise I will never put myself in danger like this again." As soon as the repairman was done, we locked up after putting her luggage inside and went over to my brother-in-law's restaurant to eat. Charlotte, Lily, and my parents met us there, and Jack's staff had to throw 2 tables together so we could all sit together. Isabella got a proper welcome to the family from everyone, and our breakfast, when it came, was over the top. Jack was so excited about what had happened, we had it all. My parents were very excited to learn that. I think my parents looked at every picture Isabella had of our children and us on her phone, and my daughters opened up to them about bringing Margaret out and discovering me. We were still there, enjoying their company, when Henry and Olivia arrived with my divorce certificate, and it was nice to know I was now free. When Isabella was given the opportunity to speak, she spent it bragging about our kids and our life together. "Mom said, we should have the wedding before the 2 of you go back." That's when my father caught Henry's and my attention. After grabbing a fresh beer each, we followed the leader. We men ended up moving into Dad's den because we couldn't get a word in edgewise. "It's been a madhouse today," Dad said when he discovered that Emily had been taken to jail. People were calling with additional information. Half the district attorney's staff had to help us out. It appears that what we knew was only scratching the surface as to what the pair were up to. It now appears that the mayor will be going down with them too. "What's going to happen to Sophia's common-law husband?" I inquired because I was curious. "And how deep was his involvement in all of this?" "He most likely will be disbarred, but he will be busy raising their kids. Nothing we've found to date links him in with the witches," Henry said. "Has anyone informed Aunt Margaret?" Olivia peered over the corner. "Dad, Isabella wears a size 6.5 ring, in case you're wondering." After a few minutes, Henry and I were driving to the mall where he had bought Olivia's set, and knowing Isabella's taste, I bought her a wedding ring set. When we returned, we were pleased to learn that they didn't know we were gone. I was on the phone with Margaret when Charlotte showed up with her boyfriend and a house full of people. We all moved into the living room, and the men had to carry a few chairs in from the kitchen. Dad had instructed Isabella to sit in his chair. When I stepped over and down on my knees to ask my common-law spouse to officially become my wife, the room fell quiet. Of course, she agreed, and the celebration began. My dad proudly said, "I've got almost 6 years of drinking with my son to catch up on, and Isabella and Thomas, your engagement is the best way to start." I had to buy a suit from Macy's because my soon-to-be wife would not let me marry her in blue jeans, so Henry had to drive both Isabella and me back to Margaret's. On Friday, we went to City Hall to get the license, and Isabella discovered she fit into Olivia's wedding dress. Jack agreed to be my best man, Charlotte became Isabella's maid of honor, and the DA agreed to perform the actual ceremony. We had informed everyone we didn't want any presents, but my ex-father-in-law grabbed an envelope from his vest and delivered it to me on Sunday afternoon, right in front of the whole family, including the twins' father. "Colin, this is not a wedding gift," he added, smiling. "It's your inheritance early." He continued, "The rest of my estate will go to your daughters." Isabella summed it up this way: "After all we've been through, once we get Grandma settled into her new home, our honeymoon will be a week in Florida and a week in California, experiencing what Disney has to offer with our children." Because without the just before we left for home the following day, I handed Isabella the envelope, which had a $100,000 bank draft and a message that said, "Thanks for helping Karma set things straight. I have always believed that the twins murdered their own mother, and I will save her the agony of seeing them rewarded and praised for their actions, as will my grandchildren." Isabella slipped the letter in her handbag without alerting anybody else. After kissing my girls and my parents, Isabella and I hopped into the budget truck rental and drove home without hesitation, fully free of everything from the past. Thank you for watching. Did the protagonist make the correct choice? Leave a comment below and remember to subscribe.